trying to pay for the hit. Scared to do it, they coward.
What's good, everybody? What's good? It's your boy, Cardinal Bud Crawford, or E. Ash Red, if that's what you want to call me. And we are back for another new topic, y'all. New topic. Why Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. should be in Cowboys Stadium in 2023. Or 3. For all y'all that ain't from the hood. Alright, y'all. So, getting toward the end of the summer, going into fall. Crawford versus Spence still isn't signed. Doesn't look like it's going to be signed anytime soon. Everybody's throwing fastball excuses at the fans for why it hasn't been signed. Everybody wants some more money. Nobody wants to take a L. Nobody's challenging themselves. And I'm not really speaking about Spence. It's more about Crawford. But the reality of the situation is we don't have this fight ready to go yet, when we've been promised by so many people that it was on the way. And it started to become a little frustrating as a boxing fan to have to keep speculating on what's the hold up, what's going on, why I haven't signed it. Are we actually going to get it ever? You know, not just in 2022, because I seriously highly doubt it's coming in 2022 now. You know, we're so close to the end of the year that I think it would be hard to put this fight together and for fans to, I mean, they could put it together, but because there's been so much on, off, I think it runs the risk of, if they put it on now, a lot of people have tuned it out already, so I don't know if it would sell as well as it would if they would have announced it a month, 2 months ago. I doubt that it's lost, you know, half or 75% of the viewership, but I think maybe 10 to 15, 20% of the people who were interested in the fight, you know, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, a year ago, have kind of tuned the whole process out. And if they were to put it on, I don't think those people would really even care or even purchase the fight. And I think now the problem with this fight is, who do you get to purchase it when you've been monkeying around with it for so long? The thing about Maypac, you know, Maypac was the biggest fight boxing's ever seen. Have there been better fights in boxing? Oh, there's been way better fights. I could name about 10 just in Manny Pacquiao's career alone that were better than Maypac. But, you know, Maypac was the pinnacle of boxing success on television and in person, you know, venue. And the problem with Crawford versus Spence, here's one of the biggest problems. I don't think people realize how influential the Philippines was in selling Maypac. You know, because it wasn't just one country supporting the fight. There were two huge countries supporting the fight. There was America and then the country of the Philippines. And I think the Philippines, they did their part in selling the fight. They did their part in purchasing the fight. They did their part in being involved in the fight. And that's what made that fight so huge. It wasn't just the American audience that made Maypac so big. It was that you had two countries benefiting off the talks of that fight. You know, the Philippines as a country, as a whole, even though the fight wasn't in the Philippines, they benefited from Maypac because it shined a light on the Philippines that wouldn't have been there if Manny Pacquiao wasn't involved in that fight. So I feel like with it being two American fighters, you don't have that luxury of having another country pushing this fight to a whole new audience. And you know, the Philippines is close to a lot of other countries. You know, they're tied into that Asian peninsula. It brought a lot of new viewership, not only to Pacquiao, but to Floyd Mayweather as well. People who would have never known who Floyd Mayweather is on the other side of the world knew who Floyd Mayweather was because of Maypac. And the difficulty Spence versus Crawford is going to have to trying to match those numbers. I know everybody wants to believe that these two fighters are just as good or just as big as Pacquiao Mayweather. It's not true. You can never be as big as Pacquiao Mayweather unless you have another country involved. And this is why I keep saying that it might be in Terence Crawford's best interest to fight someone else, and not only fight someone else, but fight someone else overseas. I think the reason that Errol Spence's name is so big is because of the Kell Brook fight. He had to go fight Brook in the UK and overseas. He had to go overseas to get that belt from Brook, and it introduced him to a whole new audience. It introduced him to a group of people, a group of boxing fans who would have otherwise never started following him if it wasn't for the fact that he fought their biggest superstar, who was Kell Brook at the time. So it always benefits you to go overseas and get a new audience involved. Now, what is the alternative to Terence Crawford going overseas to get a new audience involved? It would be a neutral site venue for that fight, for Spence Crawford. Perhaps they need a neutral site. Perhaps that neutral site should be overseas. The reason I say that is because not only would you have the American audience purchasing that fight, but you would have Americans flying overseas to go watch the fight, and you would have a whole new country purchasing the fight. They don't actually have to do it in the UK. They could do it in Dubai. They could do it in Mexico. They could do it in Canada. There's a big audience up there. There are plenty of places that they could take it over to the Philippines if they wanted to. Get Manny Pacquiao involved. They don't actually have to fight Manny Pacquiao, but perhaps you get Pacquiao to put a couple of his fighters on the undercard. You get Pacquiao to promote the fight, hype the fight for you. You pay Pacquiao $1 million to hype up the fight for you over in the Philippines, to make it that much bigger. There are other ways of making this fight sell, not just targeting an American audience. Now, is targeting an American audience good for their pay-per-view sales? Yes, because if you take it overseas, it changes the dollar amount of the fight. I believe over in the UK, they only pay about $50 for pay-per-views. Even the biggest pay-per-views are cheaper than American pay-per-views. So you might take a small hit on the pay-per-view revenue, but in all actuality, it would be bigger because you have two different countries that are going to be purchasing the fight. The American audience is still going to purchase the fight, 300, 400,000. But if you can add another 400 or 500,000 people from overseas purchasing the fight, to where if you did it in America, you might get 100,000, you might get 200,000 people. But if you actually have it in their country, I think you get 4, maybe 5, maybe even 600,000 people from that country to buy the fight, along with filling up a stadium. Overseas, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be in a soccer stadium. We all know how huge soccer is overseas. You get in them soccer stadiums, you're talking upwards of 100,000 people in the stands. Now, I said they can do it in Dallas. They should do it in Dallas Cowboys Stadium, and that's because you got the opportunity of putting 100,000 butts in seats. And that's what's going to make this fight profitable for both sides. You got to put butts in seats. Now, I think if they did it in Vegas, it'd be good. A lot of betting going on in Vegas. But I don't see them doing the numbers they would do if they did it in the Cowboys Stadium. You could do it in New York. I think you would get a big audience, but you're probably not going to do as good it would in Cowboy Stadium. You could do it down in Florida. That's a different story because it's always warm down there. If they did it in the wintertime, and that's another thing, it's going to be cold by the time this fight does pop off. It's going to be either early to mid-fall or early winter time. So it's going to be cold. So more than likely, they're going to have it in a warmer climate, i.e. Vegas, Texas, Florida, somewhere along those lines. Is going to have to be in one of those 3 states. There's no way you could do it in a New York outdoors in the middle of, you know, November, December. It's impossible for that to happen. So, you know, and that's another reason, you know, taking it overseas might be a possibility, because it's normally warmer overseas. When it's cooler in America, it's warmer overseas. So you can find a warmer atmosphere over in Dubai, you know, Saudi Arabia. They did it somewhere over there. So I think those places would benefit the fight. Is it possible to do it overseas? Is that realistic for both fighters to say, hey, you know what? There's a bigger bag of money if we take this fight overseas. I think you would get a lot of pushback from both guys. I don't think it would just be from Crawford. I think Errol Spence would give pushback to that idea as well, because, you know, he has the home court advantage down in Texas, in Dallas Cowboys Stadium. And I think Terence Crawford would give pushback if they had it in the Cowboys Stadium because of the home court advantage. And I think Terence Crawford would give pushback if they have it headed overseas because of the added stipulations that would be involved, because the rules are different over there. There would be different drug testing. There would be different everything, different referees, different judges. Now, some of it might balance things out because you don't have that favoritism of American judges and referees and all this stuff. Or they might take the judges and refs with them. You don't know. Would they actually pick some judges and refs from that country? We don't know. It would all have to be seen. But I think that would benefit both guys financially, and it would make the fight a little more even if they did it in a neutral site, and not only a neutral site, but an overseas neutral site. Hit that like button for me, share, subscribe, tell a friend, holler at me on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, but you're more than likely to get a response on the tube, so holler at me over there if you want a response. Let me know what y'all think about that down in the comment section below. I think I'm done rambling for now. Yeah, I'm done rambling. It's your boy Cardinal Bud Crawford, or E.S. Red, and we are mine.
Niggas fucked up, still getting your dick sucked by crackhead nigga.